Hey friends, Dean here. Before we get you on to your episode, I want to take a moment to invite you to our next virtual online trivia night. Wednesday, May 13th at 8 p.m. Join us either on our Facebook group or on our YouTube page for 3 rounds of fun trivia, music questions, movie questions, general knowledge questions. It'll be a fun time and a chance to win some prizes and have just a good relaxing night of some trivia at home. You don't even have to go out for it. So don't forget, Wednesday, March 13th at 8 p.m. Join us on our Facebook group or YouTube for 3 rounds of fun virtual online trivia. We'll see you there. In this episode, we're on the case with Eddie Murphy as he brings his unique style of detective work to 1984's Beverly Hills Cop. Stay with us.
Get ready for the 3324 podcast, where lifelong friends Dean Legiro and Eric Kuber share their love of all things music and movies. Dean has directed short films and is a music trivia buff. And Eric, trained in audio engineering, brings his extensive knowledge of music and film to the conversation as they discuss, debate, and celebrate their favorite albums, films, and much more.
Welcome, friends, to the 3324 podcast. My name is Dean, along here with Eric, welcoming you to this wonderful space we have out on the internet. We have carved out a little niche, a little hole in the internet where we sit and talk about music and movies.
Hello out there. Yes, indeed. We are all over the place.
We're all over the place.
Fantastic. We are all over the place. Come on. Social media.
We're like Ego and Guardians of the Galaxy too. We're coming out of the ground and overtaking the Dairy Queen.
That's right.
And just rolling down all the streets.
And we're growing from there. Or we could be like the Borg. We're just
there you go.
Assimilating everything, and we're gathering information, and we're just
assimilating it
and throwing it back at you.
There we go.
And we're having a blast. So yeah.
Awesome. So thank you for joining us. This episode, as I said in the beginning, is going to be, oh my God. We totally forgot about this film, and Eric and I were just started talking, just rambling. And I said, hey, I forgot what we were talking about. And I said, why not Beverly Hills Cop? And Eric said, you were kind of like wishy-washy. And then I started kind of talking about the characters and everything. And you're like, oh my God, yeah.
That's right. I think it's the supporting cast in this movie that really got me on board.
I think that's what it was. We started talking about everybody but Eddie Murphy, but I mean, he is the main reason for this film. But there's such a cast for days in this film of like in our world, in the 3324 world, of 80s icons, 80s movie icons.
True. Absolutely true.
Is in this film. So putting Eddie Murphy in the middle of that with all these other great actors just made for like a slam dunk. So let's jump in. Let's get the stats rolling, and then we can turn back the time machine to 1984 because we were there.
We were there.
We were there.
And it was a formidable year for film.
It was.
I think.
The
only other year I think that actually, in my opinion, is it might overshadow it. Might have been 82. I thought 82 was that was quite the year for film for us, or at least for me.
Yeah,
but 84 came back
80s, strong.
Yeah,
early 80s was still a little bit of a different time, which we'll talk about too when it comes to films like this. Although probably a year later, literally things would start to change dramatically, and we'll talk about this. So this was released in December of 1984. So this might as well have been 1985, but it was December of 84.
It just snuck right in there, and
it came in under the gun.
Mm-hmm.
Directed by Martin Brest. That's Brest. Because we're childish. $13 million budget, and it made $316 million box office. It was the biggest film it was the highest grossing film of 1984.
Was it?
I believe. Yeah.
Okay.
Of films that were released in 1984, this ended up.
And it came out in December. That's fantastic.
Yeah. So,
wild.
So they start it was released in 84. So whatever the box office it makes throughout is saying, it came out in 84. So it was the highest grossing film of 84.
And you had some big titles that year too. I mean, we're talking, you had Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. You had Starman, you had Romancing the Stone. Star Trek 3, I believe, came out. Gremlins came out this year. Wow. I mean, there was a
lot of great stuff.
Yeah. Big
just
hitters.
To watch, just to go and enjoy different things, just to be entertained.
Yeah.
That's the thing back then is there was so many movies that were just entertainment. that you could choose. And
at this point,
this
was
at this point,
Spielberg really opened that door of and a lot of family fun, and Ghostbusters too came out this year too. We can't forget about that.
Yeah. So it's just, so if you look, I mean, this is just a really fertile time.
Sure.
For these types of movies. I mean, we weren't really as you could see, this movie came out in December. So this was not like a summer tentpole movie, because that really didn't exist yet. No. There were some big blockbusters that would come out.
Yep.
But this certainly, to me, I think I saw it. I could guess I saw it in 85. So for me, it was like a summer film. But let's roll through some of the cast, and then we'll get into some of that behind the scenes stuff and the production and why we love it.
Yep.
So of course, starring Eddie Murphy. I mean, this was not his first film. He had done some film work already, but it was always in a supporting mode, right? Mm-hmm. His first one was 1982, was 48 Hours. And of course, Nick Nolte was like the name draw in that one. But 48 Hours did very well.
48 Hours is actually, I love it. It's Lethal Weapon before Lethal Weapon.
Yeah.
It kind of set that standard of
48 Hours was the buddy cop.
The first buddy cop.
Yeah, it really was. If you're looking for the beginning,
dare I say, white guy, black guy dynamic, right? It was
like Lethal Weapon,
Lethal Weapon, Crockett and Tubbs from Miami Vice.
Yeah.
So, and his performance in that film was just fantastic. You know, but the movie is so much grittier, and this, I guess, what we're kind of touched upon is how different that film is compared to this one. This one's it's tamer. Much tamer than 48 Hours. And even though there might be some of the same kind of humor, that one's just kind of like off the wall, like violent and just, you know.
Yeah, this is a little more polished and
right.
and ready for Hollywood. And that probably goes.
And this is Eddie Murphy taking control of that situation, I think.
And a little bit. I have an interesting comparison that came up in my mind while I was watching the film. 1983 Trading Places with Dan Aykroyd, Jamie Lee Curtis.
Yep.
That was just another great turn by him, but again, in kind of a smaller role. You know, Dan Aykroyd was the name there, right? And that was he was like the big draw.
Sure.
1984 would finally see Beverly Hills Cop, but then he also came out with a film called Best Defense, which is like, it was just a horrible film, and they actually added his stuff in afterwards because it was testing so poorly in the theaters. So that was almost like a glorified cameo. Really wasn't anything that was significant in this. And then Beverly Hills Cop just pops the cork on his career and just goes crazy. And then he would kind of be on the uprise and then kind of really start making some really not good films. And then it wasn't until 96 with Nutty Professor that it started to go on the upswing again. Then he did Shrek and Dr. Dolittle and really started to kind of skew towards a more family-friendly thing too. He was doing a lot of the family-friendly kind of stuff.
Yeah, working with Disney,
Daddy Daycare, Haunted Mansion.
That's right. Yep,
all that kind of stuff. So he was really kind of doing that, and then later in his career had started to swing back. So you've got Eddie Murphy, you've got Judge Reinhold, who was a staple in the 80s. Just a great, great character actor. Certainly not a leading man.
Yep.
He was in, oddly enough, Martin Brest directed Fast Times at Ridgemont High, and guess what? Judge Reinhold was in there.
Yeah,
and that was Fast Times was the film before Beverly Hills Cop, so I guess he liked what Judge Reinhold had to bring.
I'm going to correct you on that.
Sorry.
Go ahead. Amy Heckerling directed Fast Times at Ridgemont.
Oh, he did. Oh, sorry.
He did. Yeah.
No, it's right. He acted in it. He didn't direct it.
That's
okay.
Yes, I think he did appear. Yes.
Yeah.
You're right.
Okay, weird.
You're absolutely right. So he's there somewhere.
Very strange. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah, he didn't direct it. Amy Heckerling did. You're right. John Ashton, who's another great character actor. We know him from this as Taggart, and
God.
For me, most notably as the dad in Some Kind of Wonderful. I love his work there.
Yeah.
Lisa Eilbacher as Jenny, and she really didn't kind of do too much after this. She kind of she was in one of the biggest film of the year, but really wasn't able to parlay it. Really kind of didn't, stopped acting like her last film was in 92. So she really, I mean, she was more of a character actress. She was in a lot of smaller films, a lot of, dare I say, I think maybe a few B movies as well. Sort of the schlocky. Yeah, Officer and the Gentleman was her biggest one before this.
Yeah.
And then the fantastic Ronnie Cox as Bogomil. who really had for us a trilogy of films where he was just he upped the ante. So in this film as Bogomil, he wasn't a hard ass really. He was just kind of by the book,
very
right?
by the book, very sort of uptight. Even the way,
do you wish to press charges against this officer? When
I have to comment on just the way he walks. Okay, he's got that real kind of like
he saunters,
stick up his ass, kind of like. Yeah, he kind of shuffles his way. Like, it's just so bizarre.
Yeah,
and he walks exactly the same way in like RoboCop. He's the bad guy in RoboCop.
So that's what we're getting to is the second film in the if you want to see the Ronnie Cox trilogy, it's Beverly Hills Cop as Bogomil, and then 87 he would be in Paul Verhoeven's RoboCop as Dick Jones, who was like the head of the company. And really like ups the scumbaggery of his acting skills, right? He would be like James Spader's father.
Yeah.
Like as what Spader was doing in this same time in the 80s and 90s. Just that really like dicky kind of character. And Dick Jones, the name tells you everything.
I just love RoboCop. The name. It's so Dick Jones. God, you couldn't get any more basic than that.
So then he would take it one notch higher. Because he did everything he could do on Earth. So he had to go to Mars in 1990 in Total Recall as Cohagen and be the ultimate, taking that character to the ultimate.
Might have been his twin brother. His twin, Dick Jones is just sort of his twin brother.
God. As Cohagen, he was worse. He was the worst. I'll be home in time for cornflakes. It's just... just so awful, but he's so great. He's so good at it because he looks kind of wholesome. He's kind of everyman look.
That's right.
He doesn't really have like a villainous look, but when he puts it on, when he starts acting that way, it's like, oh my God, this guy is awful.
And it wouldn't end there, because if for all you Star Trek: The Next Generation fans out there, he also played a Starfleet captain in a 2-part episode.
Jellicoe.
Captain Jellicoe, who was, again, the sort of hard ass and nobody likes him. He still has that banter. He's still walking. No, everybody hates him. He doesn't get along with Riker. I think he played that role, filled those shoes very, very well. I think he was more or less
good at it.
As the villain. So
his feature film debut. I didn't know that Deliverance was his first movie.
Oh, really?
Yeah, 1972. Right. I mean, everybody kind of became a star out of that film, basically. And that was his first film. And he was in the iconic scene with the banjo when they're playing dueling banjos, and he's playing the guitar with the kid on the porch. And Ronnie Cox is playing the guitar and the kid's playing the banjo. Yeah. And we'll just leave it there. That's probably the happiest point of the film.
What is it, a King of Queens? I think it's Jerry Stiller says nobody squeals like Ned Beatty.
Yeah,
because he's watching it.
Yeah, if you haven't seen Deliverance, go see that. So let's
take that for what you will. So
let's talk a little bit about Martin Brest then, the director, because it's an interesting career trajectory. He was doing some kind of pretty much some comedies. Right. And he does Beverly Hills Cop, which becomes really gigantic. He does another great comedy, Midnight Run.
Excellent.
With
film.
Charles Grodin and Robert De Niro. Great film.
Awesome movie.
And then in 1992, like the pinnacle, he directs Scent of a Woman.
Yeah.
He directs the iconic Al Pacino performance as Colonel Frank Slade. And I mean, it's a quotable film. It's just a great film, no matter what. It doesn't feel anything like Beverly Hills Cop. It's got a different touch and a different feel to it.
Yeah.
1998 comes back with Meet Joe Black, which is like an epic.
Yeah.
I really like Meet Joe Black. A long film, and again, just a
very
different
long
feel.
Remake of Death Takes a Holiday, I believe.
Yep. With Brad Pitt and Anthony Hopkins, just those two reteaming from Legends of the Fall. And then in 2003, he makes a film called Gigli, which is widely known as one of the worst films ever. I mean, up there with Plan 9 from Outer Space. I mean, this movie was just like savaged. It was with Ben Affleck and Jennifer Lopez when they were dating, and it was just a mess. I think actually Pacino was in Gigli. Just a mess of a film, awful. and he has not directed a film since.
That's a shame.
So I I don't know what happened to him. I mean, he's 70 years old, so it's not like he's old and out of it, and he's 70 now, and his last film was 17 years ago. So he was in his 50s when he directed Gigli and just like walked away.
I wonder if that had such a profound effect on him that he decided to give it up there. I mean, I don't know. I mean, there's really. I mean, I've never seen the film myself, so I couldn't say.
I mean, it's not the worst ever.
I'm sure it's not.
It's not a great film, but
it's probably not a great film, but it's probably not that bad. Like there's a lot of films out there that have that reputation, and you watch it, it's like, this isn't really, I've seen worse. There's always a worse movie.
Yeah. And again, he's especially with what he'd done before, Beverly Hills Cop, Midnight Run, Scent of a Woman, Meet Joe Black, you can weather a stinker, even if it's a pretty notable stinker.
Everybody
right? You just kind of reset and come back. Unless that did it in, maybe people just we don't want anything from him. So yeah, let's talk about like the behind the scenes for this film. Goes back to as early as 1977, because everybody knows Jerry Bruckheimer as like producer extraordinaire, but he did have a producing partner, Don Simpson. So it was Don Simpson and Jerry Bruckheimer that were like the power duo in Hollywood with producing. Yeah, Don Simpson kind of had the idea about a cop from somewhere out east who comes to Beverly Hills. A couple of screenplays, drafts had gone around. Finally got somebody interested in it, which was Mickey Rourke.
Yeah.
For signed him for $400,000, holding him to do the film. I can't see that. Of course, it wasn't the comedy that it was.
I'm sure it wasn't.
That it became. No. But I can't see that, especially at that point. Mickey Rourke, he was in his like Pope of Greenwich Village, Diner, right in that era. So I don't know how that would have looked. The film was taking a little too long to get off the ground, so Mickey Rourke left. Martin Scorsese was approached to direct it. He passed on it. Sylvester Stallone finally gets offered the role, or considered for the role of Foley. He rewrote it because he's a screenwriter, and he's a good screenwriter, and he knows what works for him. But it was more action and less comedy.
Of course, this would not be the same film.
Well, actually, what it did become, because he wrote the character's name in his draft was not Axel Foley, it was Axel Cobretti.
Cobra.
And Marion Cobretti is the name of his character in Cobra. So I think he probably made his version of Beverly Hills Cop.
You probably
as Cobra.
Yeah. It would have been a totally different film.
Yeah.
I think, and there's a number of other actors that also were considered. I think Al Pacino was one, right? Am I mistaken on that? I think his name was kind of bandied.
Richard Pryor, Harrison Ford was offered. They've made the rounds, so as iconic as Eddie Murphy is in this role, it seems like he was not even the second choice, or he was far from the first choice. Like they were going through the Hollywood elites at that time. Pacino, Harrison Ford in 1984 could do no wrong. Right? He had Star Wars under his belt, and he had Indiana Jones under his belt. So they were looking for a big name. Stallone, I mean, they're swinging for the fences, and then they eventually land on Eddie Murphy.
Yeah.
So it's kind of, you think, oh my God, like how did it go from there to there? But it was an inspired choice.
He kind of took it in a whole different direction, and I don't know if he had a lot of input. I would imagine he did, because that's Eddie Murphy. I think if it just when you watch the film, I mean, it's Eddie Murphy Productions. He's got his own little thing in there. He's got a hook in there.
What I compared this to? You know what I thought when I watched it and it came out afterwards was Ace Ventura, because the story of Ace Ventura was the same thing. Is they were trying to develop that film, and when Jim Carrey came on, he said, I need to rewrite this and put himself into it.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think Beverly Hills Cop did the same thing. Is it would have been one thing with Stallone, but putting Eddie Murphy into it and allowing him to do what he does, because that's what you're paying for. You're not paying for Eddie Murphy to be like Stallone, right? You're paying for Eddie Murphy to take his SNL chops and smarts and comedy instincts and bring it to a feature film, which is exactly what he did.
What he did, though, was absolutely brilliant. In a time when action films were starting to kind of rise above, like they were starting to get, this was like, if just a few years later, Die Hard would come out, you had, Lethal Weapon, you had these really sort of elevated, like ridiculous, supposedly quote unquote, these guys are all, by the way, the average guy. The everyman,
and they're all cops,
and they're all cops, and they're all like supposedly the everyman cop,
just a regular Joe.
But you got Bruce Willis diving off a high-rise building attached to a fire hose. You got these really ridiculous, like elevated action sequences. I mean, the whole tone of action films started in the mid 80s and worked its way up.
Yeah, that's what I was actually getting to. It's funny you brought that up, because in 1985, Commando would come out.
That's right.
And Commando started the over-the-top action. Like, it wasn't just a car crash. It was a car crash and an explosion and five guys flying through the air.
Yeah.
And just like that, for me, I think when I was looking at it, I'm like, yeah, this is kind of like standard action stuff. There's car chases and some car stuff and, a couple of punches thrown here and there. Commando, he's throwing the buzzsaw blades. He's throwing pipes through people. And throwing grenades at people. I think that's when the action started getting amped up, and like you said, and then like it became action films became the thing.
And again,
how big can we explode?
He's good at what he did. Sure, he's a killing machine, I guess, or commando. But come on, I mean, it's just like he's just a regular soldier too. I mean, he's not
John
he's not
Matrix.
He's, these guys aren't superheroes, but the way the action was so amped up,
it became hyper real. This was still in the realm of reality. Nothing happened here that was like, oh my God.
Well, that's the brilliant thing about Beverly Hills Cop is that Eddie Murphy took what he did was the same thing like a John McClane would do, where he kind of outsmarts an entire police force, right? And why? Because he's streetwise. He's a wise ass. That's his superpower. That is like instead of action, it's comedy.
Well, it's a fish out of water comedy too, right?
Exactly.
So he's from the rough and tumble streets of Detroit, and they don't necessarily. And as you can see by the first scene, he does not do things by the book with the cigarette heist. Do you know who that the guy who plays like the gangster in that first scene when they're haggling over the money? Do you know who that is? That's Frank Pesh. And Frank Pesh, if you want to really get into trivia, there's a movie about Frank Pesh's life called 29th Street.
Okay.
And Frank Pesh won like the first lottery in New York, the first sweepstakes.
Oh, really?
And he always wanted to do something different with his life. And his parents always wanted him just to get a job, but he just, won this and then decided to become an actor. So there's a great film. It's very much like It's a Wonderful Life, but Italian style. Called 29th Street. It's with Anthony LaPaglia, Danny Aiello. So anyway, Frank Pesh is the guy in the beginning, like, 2000, I'll get you on the next one. And also we got to talk about the music was so important to this film too, because when you get that action sequence and in the beginning, when he's driving the double trailer with the cigarettes, we're hearing Neutron Dance by the Pointer Sisters. And it's also just matching the music with the film. Again, back in the 80s, the soundtracks were so important of getting artists to do music, not just score.
It most definitely set the tone for the film too, because here's this arguably the most elaborate car chase in the film.
I love watching it.
There's destruction everywhere. He's hanging
that
off
trailer.
The back of it. I mean,
that trailer is like a plow.
Yeah, the biggest probably action sequence in the film.
Absolutely.
And it's the Pointer Sisters, like, right? So you kind of like, what? But it absolutely sets the tone for what this film is. And it works.
And there's one point when that truck, the truck hits one car and it like goes into a pole and like explodes. I'm like,
and the car's just
watch that scene over and over. It's so choreographed so well.
The car's just like they're
like Matchbox cars.
Yeah, they just like they're made out of cardboard. It's like
he's just plowing them out of the way. So Eddie Murphy already is his character. Axel Foley is already we already get a lot out of the character from the first 5 minutes. And Paul Reiser is in the beginning too. His partner Jeffrey.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
there's a lot of 80s actors in this film.
When the film started, I was like, I don't remember who was Paul Reiser in this film, and then he shows up. I'm like, okay,
Jeffrey.
that's right, And then you got the character actor Gil Hill as Inspector Todd. He's that
Go home, Axel. Go home.
That typical like hard ass,
the lieutenant, captain.
And then you had the great James Russo as Mikey, his buddy
Tandino.
Mikey. Oh my
this
God.
was, I think, it might have been his debut.
Yeah.
And James Russo kind of had an interesting career. Not he's kind of been around. He's been around for a long time, and I kind of took notice of him in this film.
Mm-hmm.
And he's not in it that much.
No.
But he was actually in Fast Times at Ridgemont High as well.
Yeah. That's right. He was.
So he was with Judge Reinhold. But Beverly Hills Cop, State of Grace, My Own Private Idaho, Donnie Brasco, I think most recently, but that was in the 90s, so it wasn't even that most recently, but he's known for that kind of stuff. He plays a lot of gangster film. He does a lot of gangster stuff.
He did Open Range, the Kevin Costner film, the later film. Episode of Miami Vice, the one where they go to New York. He was in that. He was the gangster. He was kind of the guy they went to see in New York in the club, and he's dating Pam Grier's character, or Tubbs' girlfriend, Pam Grier. She's up there and she's dating James Russo, and there's just this whole thing going on there. So I always loved him, and he doesn't have like real big meaty roles, but I always loved his acting.
No, he's always in those supporting things.
The thing that gets me is he's always eating something, and I swear to God, he's eating like seeds, like
he's like Brad. He's like Brad Pitt. Brad Pitt's always eating in his films.
That upper lip is always like, you know what I'm talking about? Yeah. Like you've seen it in a couple of his earlier performances.
It's his acting method.
Yeah,
his acting method.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like a handful of like. He must have sunflower seeds or something that he's like just chewing on, or
that's his thing.
That's
how he creates the character.
Yeah.
So he meets up with Mikey, who's Axel Foley. When they were younger, they were kind of not on the right path, and Mikey stayed not on the right path, and Axel was able to straighten himself out, and that's because Mikey actually took the fall for a stolen car.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a little bit of a brotherhood there, and they feel like connected to each other because they had gone through that, and Mikey stole some bonds, which doesn't end well for him. Nope. Again, Jonathan Banks, everybody knows now from Breaking Bad.
Mike, my favorite character. Mike.
But this was an early film for him as well.
Mm-hmm.
He was just he did this, and then he did I think it was in Wise Guy, the TV show, right?
Yeah, his debut was actually 48 Hours. I think he was actually a cop in 48 Hours. And in the very beginning, he gets killed. He's the guy on the stairs that tells Nick Nolte not to give up. And he's just sort of sobbing, and he knows he's going to get blown away by James Remar, and he does. And so there's a little role there. But then in this film, he's
a lot of TV shows as well. A lot of TV work.
A lot of
very
hitmen.
Prolific.
He always plays the heavy, kind of.
So he's the hitman. He takes out Mikey, and that in turn now triggers Axel to go out to California, because that's where Mikey was working last, and that's where the bearer bonds came from. He was working for their friend Jenny, who's played by Lisa Albacher. So they get out there, and this is really when the fish out of water thing kicks in, right? Because he's used to being from Detroit, and he goes to Beverly Hills and sees just everybody's all glitzy and glamoury.
What a contrast!
Because it was a montage in the beginning of the film of scenes of Detroit. And it's, not as well to do, and people aren't doing so well. And then they have the same type of montage when he gets to Beverly Hills.
You might think that this is a totally different type of film. In the very beginning, you're thinking this is not a comedy. They're showing like the impoverished section.
Gritty crime film.
Exactly.
Perhaps.
Yeah. And then he gets to Beverly Hills, and it's like, but he's still driving his
Nova,
his piece of shit Nova from back in the day, and he just comes, driving in, and I think at this point this is Eddie Murphy, the star now, right? This might be one of the first self-aware moments in film where an actor is aware of his own popularity. And there's that one moment where he's walking down the street, and there's those two guys walking past him, and they're dressed in the same outfit that he was wearing in his HBO stand-up,
Yeah.
Delirious,
The red leather.
the red leather, and he's just laughing like, you know, like he just busts out laughing. So that was a nice little self-aware moment of,
Yep.
you know, I'm Eddie Murphy, you know, here I am. So yeah, it's just it's really really good stuff.
Yeah. And then, and I think this is where the film becomes his too, because a lot of that first part, everything in Detroit is just kind of table setting.
He's kind of blending in there.
Yeah, he has a couple of snarky cracks, but but I don't think he's got up and running yet, because it's just kind of they got to get through that plot point to now get the story rolling, and then once he gets out to Beverly Hills, he goes to meet Jenny and Bronson Pinchot as Surge. I mean, there are so many characters that came out of this film, and so many people that got careers out of it.
Yeah.
You know, and Bronson Pinchot certainly cashed in on this.
Oh my goodness.
Because after this, he went and did that show Perfect Strangers as Balky, which kind of really was this. It really was.
Yeah, it was basically, it might have been the same character. You could, you know,
very close,
you know, just a little twist of lemon, and you know, like that. I just, I can't even, like, what is he supposed to be, French?
I don't know what he's supposed to be, but just, you know, no, he's like $100,000. Yes. You know, can you believe it? So that, so there's just all these great characters that Eddie Murphy gets to bounce off of, and that's the great part of it. Is you give him interesting characters, he can then kind of maybe improvise or just kind of work with them, as opposed to just straight dramatic actors who are trying to deliver information. Yeah. So these people are delivering information, but they're interesting and they're different.
He twists every conversation is twisted, because he's just such a wise ass. He just always with the, you know, just joking and just remarking, even the looks, right? That comic timing of him just like, you know, giving that stare, and then he just breaks out into like a wisecrack smile or something, like, you know, he's always on in this film. That's the thing. He is always on.
Yeah, and that's what reminds me of Ace Ventura, is the same type of thing. It's like, you know, Jim Carrey hit the ground running, and Eddie Murphy pretty much did here too. Like once he got to Beverly Hills, it was just like one thing after another. You know, the banana in the tailpipe, sending down the supper to Rosewood and Taggart when they're in the car, and just and then the interaction with Surge, and then when he went to go see Victor Maitland, who's the main villain, right? He's the guy that owns the art gallery and ostensibly had Mikey killed. Yeah. Even then, he's cracking wise. When he's even talking about serious subject, he still is kind of, you know, fixing in on his target, but doesn't mean that he lost that sense of snarkiness.
And underneath it all, it's like he's got a purpose. He doesn't care, right? He just, you know, he's
single-minded.
He doesn't know any of these people. This guy's obviously a dangerous person. He doesn't care. Like, he knows what he has to do. And you think he's in way over his head, you know, at some certain points of the film. And he is, in a sense he is, and that kind of like adds probably the only real element of danger to this movie, you know, but it just, those moments where it's, you know, it's there, and they're trying to tell him that, you know, like the other cops are like, what do you know, don't do this, whatever, you know, because they're always by the book, and it's like very straight. Yeah,
in Beverly Hills, they are straight laced, and they don't take any shortcuts, no matter if it makes the job easier. It's like, that's not what they do. So they're really, you know, kind of a little uptight about their job, and he comes in just throwing a monkey wrench. You know what it reminded me of? You know what I was thinking about a little bit too? I was thinking about Maltese Falcon, how Humphrey Bogart was trying to, you know, solve his case, but also keep the cops at bay.
Yeah.
And this kind of had a similar thing, where he was just trying to keep the cops away from him, just so they won't botch up the case. Because if they get involved, they're going to scare off his, you know, the villain, and he's gonna you know, pull up stakes and leave.
No, he's
so
absolutely
it kind of had that aspect to it.
He's definitely doing things his way.
You know, in a comedic tone. It was the same type of thing. You know, we're not going to fall. You're not going to fall for the banana in the tailpipe.
Which, of course, you know, even back in Detroit is what he's used to doing. And, you know, he's an up and coming cop. He's not quite the veteran. His captain tells him, you're a brilliant cop. But
you don't know it all yet.
But you don't know it all.
And you still make some questionable decisions.
Exactly. You know, but he's going to do things his way. And you know what? He just, again, just it's comedy gold just to see him outsmart at every turn, outwit, these brilliant, but these guys, and some of these guys they're not young guys. Like you look at Taggart, he's not he's been on the force for quite a while. He's been doing his right. He's just like, he just wants to go home at the end of the day. You can definitely tell that he's that type,
And Chief Hubbard
is this the man that ruined the buffet at the Howard Club?
That guy's like 100 years old, Like,
even then he was right.
Yeah, he's still,
Is this the man that Rosemont? Like, and Judge Reinhold's like Rosewood.
So yeah, there's just a lot. It's great for him to have these different kind of characters to play off of. So that's the good thing, is he got the movie to himself. So he's not trying to be a supporting character, trying to kind of get some spotlight time for himself. This is all his, and he really did make the most of it. And the villain is quite formidable, and I really like Steven Berkoff in this movie. Mm-hmm. He hasn't done a lot. He's not a big name. He would do Rambo: First Blood Part 2 like the year after this or 2 years after.
Yeah.
He was like the Russian head of the Russian military thing that was after Rambo. So he has that villainous look, and that's his thing. But just his very calm, and he uses minimal words. He doesn't say a lot of words, and it's just creepy.
Yeah,
he's just creepy.
Yeah, he's the steely-eyed, very, very all together. He's got he's very just sort of, he just commands the room kind of presence, and he
knows that he knows more than everybody.
Right,
knows
nothing phases him. Yeah,
and knows that he's gonna get what he wants. And
even Axel Foley's right in his face. Right, he's he takes care of Jonathan Banks. Yeah. Like shoves him into the buffet table, and he's just sitting there, dabbing his mouth with the
Detective Foley.
And he's just like, what do you, yeah, he's not going to be phased.
Yeah,
by anything.
He wasn't flustered by that whatsoever. He was just like, yeah, whatever, it's fine. We're going to get you in the end, and they almost do. So yeah, you've got all these different things, these trying to find out who these guys are, but then also during this film too, he starts to change over some of these straight-laced cops and get them to understand that it's not necessarily about rule breaking, but it's just about doing good police work. And sometimes you just need to, make sure you're helping people. And that was his thing, is they end up foiling a robbery at the strip club, which was kind of funny. Mm-hmm. So Eddie and Axel wanted to give Taggart and Rosewood the credit, and he made up this big lie, and then Ronnie Cox is like, well, what really happened? And of course they tell the truth. It was, it was Axel. It's like, it was such a good lie, it was going to work.
Yeah, he's but because he's such a wise ass all the time, he doesn't get the opportunity to do something genuine, and he does. This is a genuine, thing for them. He, bringing the food down to them. He's like, and they were like, oh, you were throwing us off. He goes, no, that was real. I know how it is to be on a stakeout, and he's serious, and he's telling them, like, I'm looking out for you guys.
Yeah, and just like in the scene when he got punched, and Ronnie Cox says, "Do you want to press charges against this?" He goes, "We don't do that. We cops don't press charges, file charges."
What
cops.
World am I in right here? I mean, you guys, there isn't really much happening. Not a whole. You can obviously tell that this is Beverly Hills. There's probably not a whole hell of a lot of real sort of streetwise type crime happening in this section of. Yeah.
Well, apparently there was a lot going on. They just weren't aware of it. The stuff was coming in with coffee grounds on it, all the drugs and the bearer bonds.
Yeah.
And he detects that, and they the next thing is to escort him out of town. The sergeant, take Billy, take him and escort him out of town. Actually, there's a couple of other times also when they just are trying to follow him, just trying to keep up with him. The banana in the tailpipe. And that's with, was that with Marlon Wayans?
It was Damon.
It was Damon Wayans.
Damon Wayans that gives him the bananas.
Take those bananas.
Take those bananas.
So a lot of great side actors and characters that really fill out this interesting world that he's in. Because he doesn't believe that he's in this, like he's almost like in a stranger in a strange land, Beverly Hills. Right. It may as well be Mars to what the kind of crime that he's used to, and the way that his police force does things. So it was just a great.
And obviously he has to understand too that they have their own way of doing things. So there is a certain. he's got to learn himself that there's a certain way, a certain arrogance to his behavior, that I think there are moments in the film where he realizes that, and he tries to be, like I said, like he tries to do something for them, and and little teaching moments, but they're also teaching him too.
Yeah, there are
be a
times
little
when
bit
he's
more restrained and just to do things. By
like
the book.
when Jenny gets kidnapped at the end, and he's trying to break in, and Taggart's like, I'll get the search warrant. We'll be here in 20 minutes. He's like, in 20 minutes she'll be dead, so we have to do this now. Like, but it wasn't in a comedic sense. It was more like police communicating with police, like fellow officers working with each other.
He knows
and,
how
and
to.
they eventually got they eventually began to respect Foley. That he draws outside the lines, but he is also a good cop. He's not corrupt. He just doesn't do things exactly by the book.
That's right. And he knows how to turn that on too. Like he goes from 1 minute being like, but then he gets serious. And I just love the way his face just completely changes. He's a good actor. And the more he did it, I think the better he became. But he was just, he really broke out.
I like the scene when they broke into the customs, and he walks up to the security guard and goes, "You have a match?" And then he's he pulls out his badge and he's like, "Oh, I'm from the customs thing," and this guy offered me a match.
Yeah, you offered him a match? What? So I mean, he makes pretty much a fool out of everyone, just as McClane does in Die Hard, right? Like we're talking about the great Paul Gleason.
Yep. Same thing.
But he does it. Like I said before, he does it with comedy and with such, and he's not punching anybody out. He's not shooting anybody necessarily. I mean, he's just doing his own thing. And it's so great. It's so
and that shootout at the end is one of the, at the time, I thought it was one of the biggest action sequences. It wasn't the biggest action sequence in the movie, but as far as shootouts go, there was a lot that was going on.
It was pretty intense.
It's pretty intense. And does that mansion look familiar to you? Where they had the shootout at the end?
It does, actually.
You know where it was from? It was used in Commando.
It was. Okay.
It was the same mansion they used in Commando.
I was going to say something like Scarface. I'll even go as far as to say Iron Man 3, because it looked very similar there as well.
It did have that same look. I thought about that, but that in the next year they used it in Commando.
Okay.
So that that kind of tells you how important the sets are, because that mansion just had all the different stairs and all the different areas for people to come out with a gun and get blown away.
Well, the building, the police headquarters, I think, is a very famous building in Beverly Hills. I forget the name of the building itself, but it's a landmark in that part of town. So they use that for the police headquarters. So of course, why would police headquarters be so elaborate and so pristine and such a?
Well, it was supposed to be the contrast. That's so high tech, and they use computers and.
Yeah, you walk into the office. They got the screens and the like
in Detroit they got the lockers with their name written on it in tape. It's just kind of
this is not my locker. He said, mind your effing business and get back to work. He's like, this is not my locker.
Jeffrey, I'm not talking to you, Jeffrey.
Yeah.
So such a lot of great stuff in this film. I really love all the again, the depth of the cast, the depth of the actors, and it was how they're able to support Eddie Murphy really in his first feature film debut. It was so important. Again, I can't go without saying, we talked about the soundtrack, but what would this soundtrack be without The Heat Is On by Glenn Frey?
Mm-hmm. That's right.
It was just made for, and again, I can't believe this movie came out in December, because this is like a summer film for me, because The Heat Is On is like a summer song.
It was all over the radio. Yeah.
And Axel F by Harold Faltermeyer. He did the sound. He did a lot of the incidental music, and that theme. That's pretty much became a big thing.
Well, that's pretty much the whole score.
Yeah,
it's nothing but that. I was a kid. There'd be just a little variation from the theme, but the whole pretty much the whole score is the.
Yeah, there's no like orchestral score. It's that, and then it's the music. You've got Patti LaBelle had a couple of songs on there. Stir It Up, New Attitude, and then mainly Harold Faltermeyer overseeing and doing the score with some popular artists of the time filtered in, and of course The Heat Is On actually opens the film, and then you get Neutron Dance right after it too. So
I think it's great that they open the film with that song, and when they're showing the streets of Detroit. Glenn Frey himself was from Detroit. So I thought that was
it's a nice callback.
Didn't know that at the time, but of course it makes perfect sense now. When you watch the film, I think it's great. It's a nice little tribute to him.
Yeah.
So
how many times did we see this in the I know I saw this in the theater at least 2 or 3 times.
I think I myself saw it twice. I don't remember who with who.
Yeah. It was that kind of film.
Yeah, it might have been with our good buddy Dwight, who's always
good buddy Dwight.
Yep.
Yeah,
I
remember.
Must have been.
This was
Johnny
back in the day when I would just go see stuff over and over that I really liked.
Oh yeah, I mean,
84 was this. It was Breakfast Club. All those movies that just kind of.
80s.
Yeah, I'm just gonna go see this again.
Yeah, 80s was our time. That was our coming of age for film.
The movies were very repeatable and able to rewatch, pay to go to the theater and go see it again.
How many times did we see Commando? How many times did we see Predator? How many all the Schwarzenegger? We couldn't wait for the next one to come out, right?
Yeah. And then we'd have to go see it again. And Beverly Hills Cop was in that pantheon of films that when I saw it, I'm like, oh my God, I got to go see this again. Just because it was so different from a lot of the stuff that was out there too. Everyone knew Eddie Murphy from his SNL stuff. So he had an established body of work. Mm-hmm. So he wasn't an unknown entity or quantity. We just didn't know how well it would translate to film because, everything he had done before was kind of smaller roles. So it's easy to kind of dip your toe in the water. This is him carrying it, and he carried it in a big way. This was the biggest film of 84.
The 80s really, but again, we touched upon how the tone of the films sort of changed in the 80s and how much excess there actually was. And the bigger the budget, the higher the ideals and the action, everything was sort of elevated and,
And everybody had to outdo each other. We need to die hard to die harder and to be even bigger and deliver more. And it just...
I actually went back and I watched 48 Hours in prep for this. I watched both just to compare the two. And there is such a big difference in the tone of the films. Eddie Murphy, still the wise ass, still still sort of acting more or less, in this case, he's the con man. But in this case, he's suave, right? He's got the suit, he's got the fancy car, he's got the money, he's trying to set himself straight in the thing. And he's the smarter of the two between him and Nick Nolte. He's got and even Nick Nolte says it in the film. He goes, this guy's got more brains and more guts than anybody I've ever worked with. And they become great friends. Well, not great friends, but they mutual respect for one another by the end of the movie. But it still had that grittiness to it. It still had, coming off the 70s, it was still very violent.
Yeah.
The language, I mean, every other word was a curse word. I mean, there's a lot of nudity. Beverly Hills Cop, it gets to that point, and there's some of that's remaining, but it's very, very tame.
Yeah.
In comparison to
still rated R, but for different reasons.
But you could actually take your kids to see it. It's really not that.
I would.
I don't. I mean, it's really not. I mean, for kids who obviously
I guess
into Eddie Murphy.
First, I'd have to have kids.
Well, I'm just saying, if you were an Eddie Murphy fan in the 80s, a kid in the 80s who loved Eddie Murphy, and you asked,
could get away with it.
If you asked your folks to, hey, take me to see this movie, you could totally do that. It had that.
It's violence, in language.
Yeah.
But yeah,
48 Hours on the other hand, that's going a little too far. But that was the early 80s, but I like that time. I really dug that time when it was just the sort of the coming of the decade, and it's interesting to see now when you watch these films and how much they progressed over time. And then by the end of the 80s, we're getting, it's like you said, die hard, die harder, die hardest.
Yeah,
how many
sequels?
Can we
outdo it, and just kind of. It became about the spectacle.
Yeah.
And less about the story. And I think Beverly Hills Cop is in the last of that era where
in those throes
where you had that balance of they were still like action wasn't being thought of on a grander scale. It was always car chases, car crashes, and shootouts. I mean, that's pretty much the realistic world that everybody lived in, and no one thought about hyper reality in action, even for a normal human being to just do something hyper active and just have that be the way the movie is. Not that they're a superhero, but it's just that's where they are. And Beverly Hills Cop wasn't that, and it was a straight up comedy and action comedy. So this is the perfect vehicle for him.
Yeah, even the sequel, the second one was
we're going to talk about the sequels, huh?
Well, I mean, it was just, like you say, I mean, it had to be bigger. It had to be, they had to up the ante on the action. And so, yeah, it wasn't as good. But I didn't even see the third one, to be honest. I heard
that's
it was
the
horrible.
Thing is, it did well, Beverly Hills Cop 2. It made $276 million. So it made money, but it had really mixed reviews, though. It really was trying to recapture lightning in a bottle.
Mm-hmm.
But it didn't really work. And then they went to the well one more time with John Landis to take a crack at it. And that made like 120 million almost, somewhere around there, which again is the budget was 70 million. So it eked out a profit.
Yeah. He didn't even want to do it unless he got paid handsomely for it. And I think a large chunk of that budget went to Eddie Murphy just to get him to be, just to reprise the role.
Yeah. And it's one of those things when you become self-aware of the material, it becomes harder, just like Ace Ventura 2. But, Ace Ventura 2 was self-aware of what they were doing, and it kind of lost something there. Like that lightning in a bottle of the first one, when it comes to comedies, it's hard to recapture a second one.
Yeah, you can't, because you end up going back and repeating the same jokes.
The closest that came was Austin Powers. Like the 3 Austin Powers films were all funny. Like that's a rare trilogy.
Yeah, I agree. I think the second one is the best. Actually.
Yeah,
I loved it better than the first one. So
and in this case, Beverly, and from what I understand, Netflix has picked up the rights or the option to make a Beverly Hills Cop. I guess it would be 4, because they made Coming number 2, America. They made a sequel to Coming to America, Netflix, with Eddie Murphy and Arsenio Hall, and it did very well.
Yeah,
on Netflix. And now it looks like he might be revisiting Axel Foley. Now, if they get the right writers to do it now, and maybe now can be a little more self-aware since it was so long ago, I think you might be able to get away with it. And it depends on what Eddie Murphy brings to it as well.
Well, they tried to do a TV show too. At one point, they were bringing in a
couple of years. I'm thinking of the Lethal Weapon TV show from a couple of years ago.
But they wanted to do a TV show. They did a pilot, and it didn't do well at all. It didn't score well. And I think Eddie Murphy said that the only way that he would actually come back is if he just did it in sort of cameo. Like he would have to be another character. And he wouldn't come back full on as Axel. Like he would just be in it. He would probably be more behind the scenes with it. And he would just be like, sort of like Shaft. Like when Samuel L. Jackson did Shaft, and his, Richard Roundtree came, the first Shaft was that, and he was his, it turned out to be his uncle,
I don't know. He might be afraid of how it might turn out. Maybe that's why. Maybe that's why he's so trepidatious about it.
Yep.
But it might be something worth looking at. Again, they did it with Cobra Kai. YouTube, they respected the source material and was able to make something that people enjoyed, that watched it then, but was accessible now. So they can certainly do it.
Yeah.
It would be interesting. Ronnie Cox is still alive. John Ashton is still alive, and Judge Reinhold is still alive.
That's
so
true.
They can, if they really wanted to really go there the full way, round them all up.
Bring them all in. Sure.
Round them all up and bring them all in.
No doubt about it.
Ronnie Cox is up there, but hey, he can do it. And I think it might be something worth looking at if they do. It's in development, so we'll have to see what happens with that. But yeah, I think that's going to do it for Beverly Hills Cop. God, it was. Watch. I hadn't seen this film in so long, and I don't know what started us talking about it.
It was fun.
We just did.
Great choice.
And it was a revisit for me, because maybe I own it on DVD, but if I did, I never opened it. It's probably sealed somewhere. So it was one of those ones that always fondly remember, but it's never really on cable. I never really catch it anywhere. I don't see it anywhere.
The funny thing is it was all over streaming. I had HBO, was there.
Oh,
all
really?
The sequels were there. And it's just, I never really bothered to watch it. Then we started talking about it. I'm like, oh, I can, and it was gone, of
Yeah,
course.
I had to rent it. I rented it from Prime.
I had to rent it off of Amazon Prime.
That's how I think they know what we're watching, what we want to do, and then
48
they
hours
take it
for
off.
that matter. Yeah, I had to do both off of Amazon Prime. I had to rent both of them.
Because Prime always has like the Paramount stuff in there. They'll have the Star Treks, and it'll come and go, and then the other
pretty
ones
much. I think both of them are actually on Paramount Plus at this point. I think so
it's out there. It's just
it
was one of those ones that I would just pass by. It's like, yeah, Beverly Hills Cop. I'm so glad we decided to take a look at it again and take a watch, because it really was for me very much nostalgic, but nostalgic in a good way, because films aren't made like this anymore. They try to, but there's just something about it. And at this point in Eddie Murphy's career, he was just on the uprise, and it was the perfect time to capture him on film and put him with a great cast so he could just work his magic. That was what it is very much like Robin Williams too. It's like, get people around him and let him go. And that's what Eddie Murphy was in Beverly Hills Cop, is get people around him. There ain't much of a story here. It's very thin. It's a murder. It's some drugs. That ain't the reason to watch this. That's just the vehicle to get Eddie Murphy from one situation to another, and in one character interaction to another. That's really what it is. You're not watching this for that. You're watching it to just see him, his breakout performance.
Yeah. And he was king of SNL at that point too. The 80s weren't really the time for SNL. Yeah, I think it was like Lorne Michaels.
He's widely credited as saving it. Yeah, because that was when Lorne Michaels was away,
right?
And they didn't know what they were doing, and he was literally the second coming for SNL. I mean, he literally saved their bacon for those years.
That's right.
With all just the iconic characters. I mean, back then everybody was watching it just because he had so many. He had Buckwheat, he had Gumby, he had Mr. Rogers. He did the James Brown thing with the hot tub. I mean, he had so many different characters. And then he came out with Delirious, which was his stand-up.
Oh, my God.
And everybody was quoting this. I mean, there wasn't anybody that did not see Delirious at the time and wasn't quoting from that stand-up. So that thing was just, everybody was hysterically laughing. It was an HBO special. And that's all everybody was ever talking about before this came out, right? Everybody just used to be quoting Delirious.
That's right.
All the impressions. He did Elvis Presley. He did Jackie Gleason. He had, all of his, his Bill Cosby influences, his Richard Pryor influences in stand-up. Yeah. All these things come together for Delirious. And you see that also kind of in his film work. You see his influences.
So raunchy. He's not afraid to go there. He's very on point, and he can get as dirty as they come.
Yeah.
But it's hilarious. The way he does it, the delivery, it's just,
back then he was just on fire. He's been around for so long, and his career's had some, more downs than ups, but back then he was everything. I mean, everybody was just always talking about Eddie Murphy. What did he do on SNL? And then he did his thing.
And he kind of, like we mentioned, he kind of cleaned. Well, I wouldn't say cleaned up his act, but he really gravitated to much tamer stuff, like family oriented. It really became, and that's a really cool thing to see too. I like that about that change. This was a guy who was never on into drugs or alcohol. He was like even filming Beverly Hills Cop. There's the scene where he's talking about the super cop, where he's giving the credit to the other. He had a couple. They tried to give him a couple sips of coffee just to get the energy up, and he refused at first because I don't put any of that in my body, but he did. So if that scene does come off where he's kind of rushing his lines a little bit,
there you go.
There it is. There's that little caffeine high right there. So
and back then all it took was coffee. So that's how tame it was back in the 80s,
right? Yeah.
So that's gonna do it for this episode of the 3324 podcast. We are on social media, so please give us a follow there. On Instagram and Facebook, we're at 3324 podcast. On Twitter, we're at 3324p. We also do live shows every other week now, as long as the schedule holds. So check us out there. We have a lot of fun. That's your chance to interact with us. And new episodes weekly on Thursdays. And then we have our shorter episodes called Quick Hits. Those come out on Monday. So plenty of content for you to delve through, dive in. You'll find something in there, I guarantee you. It's like going to a rummage sale. You just got to sort through, and at the bottom is the thing that you didn't know you needed, and that's what it was. That's what our podcast is. You didn't know you needed it, but once you get here, you understand that you do.
You're absolutely right. Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Oh, so we
what
thank
a great
you.
assessment.
Yeah, it is a great assessment, right? We're like the thing at the bottom of the thrift pile that you didn't know you needed, but can't live without.
There you go.
I think that might be our new slogan. Didn't know you needed it, but can't live without it.
Sure. Yeah,
we'll work on that. Yep. Bumper sticker on the way. So we will, until next time, we will see you real soon. Again, for Eric, this has been Dean, and we're going to ask you to please be kind and rewind.
You've been listening to the 3324 podcast with Dean Legiro and Eric Kuber. You can find us on your favorite podcast provider, so please like, subscribe, and rate to become a part of the 3324 family. Your feedback is important, so make sure to follow us on Instagram and Facebook at 3324 podcast and on Twitter at 3324p to join the conversation.